Can everybody? Apologize for the brief delay. Our committee of the whole meeting ran right through till 6, so we had to take a quick brief pause to reset the room to set up for our regular council meeting tonight. So this time I'd like to call to order the regular council meeting of Tuesday, August 24th. As always, we are pleased to be here today on the traditional territory of Treaty 6. We acknowledge all those who share a deep connection with this land. The city of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all Canada's First Peoples, whether they be of First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich Canada's vibrant communities. We are all treaty people. The peace treaties do bind us all. Are there any changes to the agenda? Ms. Winter?
Thank you, Your Worship. Administration doesn't have any additions to the agenda this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a member of council willing to move the agenda as proposed? Councillor Hendricks.
So moved, Your Worship.
Thank you. Call the question. Oops. All in favor? And that carries unanimously. As there is only one item on the consent agenda, we're going to skip consent agenda, move to open forum. I don't think there's anybody in the open forum this evening, is there?
Thank you, Your Worship. We have no registered open forums this evening.
Thank you very much. Which brings us to item 5A, which was the single and only item on the consent agenda. Adoption of the regular council meeting minutes of August 10th, 2021. Member of council willing to move the adoption of the agenda. Sorry, City Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to make note that there was an error in the minutes in the agenda, but they have been since amended. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure if I exactly heard what Ms. Winter said, but I was going to move acceptance of the minutes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Ms. Winter was just mentioning that there was an error. There was a typo that was sent, or an error that was since been fixed.
If fixed,
So-
then I would be pleased to move that.
Thank you.
Minutes.
Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor? And that carries unanimously. There are no items on the agenda for public hearings this evening. We have no registered presentations, which brings us to business item 8A, Council Policy C14, Purchasing Approval, which we just had a rather good discussion on about an hour ago. Mr. DeBlanco, whenever you're ready.
Thank you to the mayor and council. Before you this evening is a request for decision that council approve council policy C14 purchasing policy as amended by the committee earlier this evening. That policy is presented in attachment 1. I'm not going to go through in great detail on what was discussed before, but this policy has been developed to define standards for procurement of goods, services, and construction contracts for the city and to ensure compliance with relevant trade agreements. Policy was presented to committee whole on June 15th, sent back to administration to incorporate recommended changes, and then further presented earlier this evening. Quick summary of the changes to attachment 1 are addition of the word monetary before the word values on the definition for agreement on internal trade, as well as changing the words equally to equitably within the second paragraph of the ethics section, as well as the addition of an additional sentence on social value considerations and the definition of diverse and indigenous suppliers. At this time, I'll turn this over to council for any further questions on the policy.
Thank you very much, Mr. DeBlanco. I appreciate that. And as we so ably went through in the last committee of the whole meeting, which ended just before this, we had a really robust discussion. So I do appreciate that. So I'm going to move right to the motion. And then if there's any further questions or concerns, we can address them as we discuss the motion. Is there a member of council willing to move that council approve council policy C14 purchasing policy as presented in attachment 1 and amended at tonight's committee of the whole meeting? Councillor Danlow.
So moved, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussions or questions on the motion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Blanco. Appreciate all your time tonight. Which brings us to item 8B, Beaumont Affordable Housing Strategy. Ms. Sangster on Zoom.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Emily Sangster. I'm a long-range planner with the city and the project lead for the Affordable Housing Strategy. With me also is Kim Williston, Director of FCSS, who has been a major partner in developing this strategy, given its connection to the Social Master Plan. Tonight, I will provide a brief overview of the strategy and also highlight some of the revisions that have been made since Committee of the Whole received the draft in June. Then Ms. Williston and I will be very happy to respond to any questions that you might have before considering the recommendation to adopt it. Before I begin, I just wanted to acknowledge Councillor Barnhart's role as chair of the board of the Leduc Regional Housing Foundation, which is another of our major partners in this strategy, and her support for this initiative and for developing affordable housing options in our region. As a bit of background, the strategy was an action item in our 2019 municipal development plan and aligns with our other directional plans and policies, including the Social Master Plan and our recently approved age-friendly strategy. It supports direction from the regional growth plan to plan for all communities in the region to develop as complete communities, which include a range of housing options to suit different household types, life stages, and incomes. There's also a wide range of research indicating that affordable housing and its capacity to help households reallocate money and time for other purposes can support individual household well-being, but also engagement in the broader community and the health of local businesses. I'll also note that we've used the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation's definition of affordable, which means housing that costs less than 30% of a household's gross income. This can mean very different things for different households, and so the strategy has tried to take this into account. As you'll probably recall, this project proceeded in 2 stages. So the first one took place from summer 2020 to January 2021 and focused on understanding local housing needs and challenges. The second lasted from January 2021 to the present and focused on developing a strategy that addresses those needs. Each stage included opportunities for review and input from council, senior leadership team, industry stakeholders, and the public. A project working group comprising representatives from various city departments and the Leduc Regional Housing Foundation was also established to guide the project and provided more detailed input and review. And we've had support throughout from the consulting firm Urban Matters, who have provided an advisory and peer review role for our engagement plans and reports, and have contributed their knowledge of best practices in the development of the strategy. So there are 2 documents in the council package this evening. The first is the needs assessment report, which identifies key housing needs in Beaumont based on housing data and stakeholder and public input. It found that while the majority of Beaumont households are able to find a suitable and affordable home in the private market, there are some gaps in 4 key areas. The first one is market affordable rental housing. The second is non-market or below market housing to serve households on lower or fixed incomes. And for both of these types, there's a particular need for 1-bedroom units that are suitable for young adults, singles, and seniors. The third gap is access to emergency shelter and transitional housing options locally. And the fourth is supportive housing options that are affordable and accessible, especially serving seniors and people with disabilities. The needs assessment report has had a few minor revisions since it was brought to Committee of the Whole in June, based on new information and some stakeholder comments. And I'll just run through these quickly. The first one is adding our transportation master plan and our recreation, parks, and facilities master plan to our discussion of the policy framework, just recognizing their role in creating complete communities and supporting the success of an affordable housing strategy. We've also added some new text to indicate that Beaumont's overall housing affordability levels are already in line with the affordability thresholds that are in the regional growth plan. And then there have been some minor text updates to reflect the fact that the Alberta Affordable Housing Review Panel report has been completed, and there's a redesigned provincial rent supplement program. and also just to reflect some newly approved area structure plans in Beaumont. So some minor updates, no major changes to the overall content of the needs assessment report. The second document is the strategy document itself. And again, a previous version of this was presented to Committee of the Whole in June. So this envisions Beaumont as an inclusive, equitable community that offers a diversity of safe, affordable housing options that meet the needs of all residents. It sets targets for overall affordability and for progress towards addressing each key need. To make that progress, it identifies 15 actions under 4 strategic directions that focus on the direct municipal role, community and industry partnerships, public engagement and education, and advocacy to senior levels of government. And finally, it sets out an implementation plan that includes responsible parties, timing, indicators to be monitored, and a reporting and review schedule. So as a result of Committee of the Whole's comments, input from the working group, and our second round of public and stakeholder engagement in July, that document has been revised in a few key ways, and I'll walk through those now as well. So first, there has been some revision to more clearly acknowledge the relationship between housing and other components of a complete community. It was noted in several different areas of our engagement that the city's work to provide accessible community services, diversify our local economy, and offer local transit are all really essential to supporting housing choices. There's also more detailed discussion of the roles and responsibilities of various levels of government, and just noting particularly the areas where municipalities are especially well positioned to act. There is clarification that the strategy's market rental housing targets are anticipated to increase market affordable supply as well. And this is because the current average rents in Beaumont are considered market affordable by EMRB standards. There's acknowledgement that the city's work to create partnerships may include working with Indigenous communities and housing providers as the city works to develop those relationships, and may also include seeking opportunities for pilot projects and innovative financing and delivery models. There is clarification of our implementation, funding, and communications approaches, including how actions in this strategy would relate to the budgeting process and to other frameworks that the city has in place. We've amended Action 1.2 to contemplate potential fee waiver or tax deferral programs alongside a potential reserve fund, just to give the city additional flexibility to support high impact projects in a way that best meets the needs of both parties. There's also a new Action 2.4 to reflect the need for and the current status of an emergency shelter program for adults that supports and is shared among various actors in our region. And then finally, there have been additional minor text revisions and addition of a few graphs and figures for clarity and for ease of reading. So with those refinements in place, administration's of the view that this strategy reflects Beaumont's housing needs, incorporates best practices for the municipality's role in affordable housing development, is consistent with Beaumont's current policy direction, and will help Beaumont continue to develop as a complete community with an exceptional quality of life. Should Council adopt the strategy this evening, administration is committed to continuing to work with stakeholders and industry partners to put the strategy into practice. So with that, I will thank you very much for your attention and invite any questions or comments for me or Ms. Williston about the process, findings, recommendations, or potential implementation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sangster. We really do appreciate it. We've had some really good discussions surrounding this topic over the last or the life of this project, and do appreciate it. And I appreciate all the revisions that were made to this draft strategy. We'll open it up to questions for members of council before we move into the motion. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you. 2 questions. The first one around funding, the second one around communication. Last time we spoke about this in June, I spoke about the funding of affordable housing initiatives in the future. Just wondering if you can speak to this strategy's ability to explore alternative funding strategies and models in the future. excuse me, as I had stated previously, I think the days of just waiting for tax dollars to be allocated to this important aspect of housing in the community are behind us. So just wondering if you could speak to, I think there's a couple spots in there that are going to allow that. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I think, as you've noted, there are a lot of different potential funding sources for affordable housing, and we may not necessarily be able to rely on tax funding to implement these. One thing that is likely a very promising element in this regard in the strategy is sort of the focus that we have on trying to develop partnerships with different actors. We may be able to engage with different nonprofit housing providers who may have different sources of funding. We may be able to leverage smaller contributions that we might make to access funding from other levels. So I think in developing those partnerships, potentially alternative models or innovative models may become clearer.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's right. And I'll also note that, the strategy does also suggest, dedicating some staff resources to those partnerships. And I think that's very important. And I'm glad to see that. Second question is just on communication, and just wondering if you can speak to the strategy's ability to complete some upfront communication both to and within the community, maybe on the basics of, just what exactly affordable housing is and why it's needed. I know that we've beat that up quite robustly in this document and through the process to get to this point, but I think that there's, I know that is going to be needed. There's a few places that this document will allow that to happen, speaking to engagement and meetings and partners and such, but I definitely see this as a project need upfront. I think without community buy-in, aspects of this strategy could become fairly challenging. So just comments on the communication and the ability to do that within the strategy. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, there are a few actions that contemplate just providing not only more channels for outward communication from the city, but also more opportunities for the city to hear kind of as early as possible from members of the community questions regarding the development process or concerns they might have. So one of those is our action relating to developing more opportunities for residents to engage with the development process. And this can be nailed down in the future as part of implementation, but there are a few proposed strategies for doing that, various types of community meetings or potentially small courses that the city might offer. So that can be refined in terms of what we do, but there are definitely some ideas there for doing that. We also have an action relating to providing more information from the city on what our current development context allows residents to do in the city and sort of what they can expect from our land use bylaw and our policy framework. So those might include things like information on developing secondary suites, information on development projects that may be coming down the pipe. There's a few options for us to communicate in that way as well. And additionally, there are a few other actions that we have relating to potentially developing a fee waiver program or developing a framework for identifying the location of future projects. And all of those would likely require additional engagement with the public as we get into the nuts and bolts of those. And that's envisioned as well. Yeah,
thank you. And what I would say is I've seen consistent improvement around engagement as projects have progressed. There's always learnings along the way, and when we get to a point in this community of affordable housing being allocated to different regions and areas, then targeted communication to the people in that area and invitations to talk and such are not outside the realm of possibility. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Van Newkirk. Councillor Monkoff Swain, followed by Councillor Stout, followed by Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Worship, and great job again, Ms. Sangster, on providing this document, particularly Action 2.4. That's a great addition, so thank you for that. I'll come back to that in a second. The question I had was just around the monitoring. So recognizing 2028, and you had the policy or the plan, speaks to monitoring every 2 years. I'm just curious on what that looks like for administration. Administration monitor and look at it every 2 years. At what point does council get updates on this? I guess the reason why I'm asking this question is such an important policy like this. This seems to be the thing that if it's not front of mind in front of council, then it tends to get forgotten. And so I'm just curious on what administration, when they're looking at monitoring, what involvement does council have in terms of updates on how this is going?
My understanding is that these reports would be designed to be fairly kind of publicly accessible and easily disseminated, so they could be brought to council for information and also made available to the public as well. I may also ask Mr. Wong if there are other sort of thoughts on that or other questions of process that might be relevant here.
Mr. Wong?
Yep, just unmute myself. So with regarding to the monitoring, there will be definitely the report coming to council on the progress of the implementation of the strategies over the years. And not only that, through the monitoring, I believe it is also the check the pulse of how those implementation actions are meeting the goals of the housing strategy, so that we can adjust our course of action, not necessarily just stay on course for the 7 years, because the strategy also talk about a 7-year review. So we are not going to wait until the seven-year point, but during this monitoring and progressing report, we will be self-evaluating and work with the stakeholders to adjust the course of action as well. So definitely, as Ms. Sandster is saying, the report will be made available first of all to council, and probably more important is a report to the general public.
And thank you for that clarification, and absolutely important to make sure that not only council but the public is aware of the progress and whether you need to course correct. My initial reaction was every 2 years was too spaced apart, but I'll leave that for you guys to consider. The pivoting a little bit onto some of those actions, and this is the second time I've raised this tonight on a different topic, but the concern for me is, does this have enough teeth? Does this have enough teeth in the document? Does this give administration enough? There's a lot of language in here that's kind of soft, that says, develop partnerships and work with children's services and continue discussions. I don't see anything kind of hard that is going to say, yeah, okay, this is exactly what we're going to be doing, and we're going to be putting a focus in on that. So I'm just, for me, when I read that, it sounds nice, and it looks aspirational to me, but I don't know if it's strong enough, and maybe the implementation is where you guys will be adding that extra effort. But this is clearly something that, whether it's Councillor Barnhart raising this multiple times and all the presentations in front of us, I worry that this is too aspirational and not targeted enough. So a comment on that language.
I do see where the concern is coming from, because, as noted in the presentation, and I think that has been noted at other times in our discussions, is affordable housing requires a large number of partnerships, and sometimes it's difficult to know where those partnerships may go or where they may arise from. So we've endeavored to put a strategy together that allows us the flexibility to pursue those. And that allows us the flexibility to work with different levels of government and adjust as we need to, sort of reflecting the role that we have as a municipality and the fact that we can't necessarily finance or cause the development of affordable housing to happen on its own. So I certainly see where that concern comes from. We've endeavored to make it as concrete as we could within the constraints that we have regarding our role.
So maybe let me be a bit more specific then on page 119 under action 2.4, when we're talking about the emergency shelter. The action says continue ongoing discussions among municipalities, FCSS, on how to best offer short-term emergency shelter. Then it talks about the completion is ongoing. Like that to me could be a conversation that carries over. And I know you're updating it or looking at it every 2 years, but to me, why wouldn't we consider having that completion date, or maybe like a target date to be able to bring an option back to council, by X date or something like that? Just something harder for you guys to make sure that and I recognize you're not going to let this go. This is an important piece that you're going to be tracking and following. But I think by providing some more specific dates or some targets on that completion versus just ongoing would give this a bit more teeth, and for me anyway, on council to know, okay, in 2 years we'll come back and bring that report back on 2.4 and how that's going and what we think that could be. And that's just a specific example, but that is my concern here, is that, you know, we're just gonna have these conversations and you know, further develop relationships and partnerships, but nothing gets done. And I recognize it's easier said than done, but just your thoughts on that, the completion language of ongoing versus maybe putting a more specific target date in there to bring that back to council.
Certainly. With respect to the sort of the format of reporting in general, the intention is that we are going to be reporting on progress towards each specific action. With respect to action 2.4 specifically, I will defer to Ms. Williston, who has a much closer knowledge of that area than I do.
Thank you, Emily. Apologies, I'm having camera issues with my Surface, so I can't get it to work properly. So apologies, but your worship, through to Councillor Munkoff-Swain. I'm hearing what you're saying with regards to the partnerships, and I certainly do agree with you. The slight concern that we have with this is we are one regional partner here, along with our colleagues in the county, in the city of Leduc, in Devon, and we in Beaumont don't get to specifically determine the timeline on that conversation. I appreciate your comment that, you know, conversations are good, but we really need to strive towards some targets. I would say to you that part of my role in FCSS is going to be helping to develop some of those targets that we don't quite have yet, because we do realize that we can't do it individually by municipality, and we do need that regional approach. It's just that we haven't quite clearly defined that yet. So there's more work that needs to happen, and that will be something that will be led primarily through the FCSS departments across the region. So that's something certainly, as we sort of work to a little bit more of a strategy, we could probably get some timelines, but at this time, I don't have anything specific to get to you, but I hear what you're saying, and I think it's a very important comment for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Williston, for the clarification there and the continued work in the background to implement this. So, you know, I'm good with the answer, and I appreciate that, and I'm good with this document generally. Again, depending on who's here next term, I'll be looking for you know, those updates on those actions, and it may be through council inquiries, it may be through budget time, it may be through different areas outside of that 2-year reporting, to make sure that you guys and, you know, we've said this multiple times in this forum, where we're asking FCSS to bring forward, you know, those if there are things that you need to be able to implement this, bring those forward at budget time and put that in front of council so we can discuss that. It may go up or down, but you know, that ask again for FCSS to be aggressive when coming here, recognizing that the balance that the CAO is putting on the budget process, but yeah, be aggressive, bring forward these initiatives, these ideas at that budget process, because clearly there's a need here, and this document highlights that specifically. So thanks again for all the work. I'm supportive of this, and looking forward to seeing this being implemented and how you guys can move forward. So thanks for the time, Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor, for your remarks. Appreciate them. Councillor Stout, followed by Councillor Barnard.
Thank you, Worship. Not sure who the first question I have, I'm going to direct at, but we'll see where this goes. Looking at the assessment needs report, which I thought was great work. Actually, really appreciate the attempt to quantify everything so that we can and provide statistics so that we can see where the shortfalls are, assess the needs, and going forward, monitor whether we're making progress or not to addressing those needs. I think that's all terrific, and acknowledged as well the difficulty with statistics not always being as up to date as we'd like, or even incomplete. So, and you probably all know me well enough now to not be surprised that I tend to wade into the statistics a little bit, and I found them very illuminating and interesting, actually, to looking at the profiles of Beaumont. There was one of the questions I had. There's one sentence that completely confuses, or two sentences actually, that completely confused me, though, that I think either need to be edited or because they're either wrong or I'm just not understanding what it says. I'll refer you to page 32 of 153 in the agenda package. Oh, and I'm looking at the unrevised agenda package. So it's page 16 of the Beaumont Affordable Housing Needs Assessment Report. Simply, this is not a big deal. It's peripheral to the main thrust of the report, but it still confused me. And as it's a public document, I imagine it will confuse anybody else who reads it. It says just 19% of employed Beaumont residents worked in Beaumont, either at a fixed location or at home. Of the 67% who worked outside of Beaumont, I'm going to stop there. So 19 and 67 doesn't add up to 100. It adds up to 86, which makes me wonder where the other 14% of people are working if they're not in Beaumont or outside of Beaumont. And then following on, 59% worked in Edmonton, 15% in Leduc County, 8% in Leduc, 6% in Strathcona County, 3% in Wood Buffalo, and 4% elsewhere. Again, doesn't add up to 100%, it adds up to 95. So again, I'm wondering whether those 5% work if they don't work elsewhere. Not expecting anybody to answer those questions. Just wonder if before we publicly release and approve this document, we could address those statistical issues, or just, and I think it's worth putting that statement in there. I find it very interesting that 59% of our population works in Edmonton, if that's the correct number. Second question.
Go ahead.
Well, that's a comment really, so I guess I didn't ask a question. Second question regards actually it's related to 2.4, and just bear with me while I page forward. Essentially, there's a lot of statistical data here, I'm sorry. There we go. So I'm referring to 104 of 153, my agenda document. It's page 21 of the Beaumont Affordable Housing Strategy. This is what I was wondering. Between 18 to 20 youth annually have sought housing support from Chantal Berube Youth Centre in recent years. But then our target for achievement by 2028 is that, and I think this is a really valuable and important target. I'm glad it's in there, but the target is local program able to support 15 youth needing shelter annually. I don't think that's ambitious enough 10 years out, that we still can't support all the youth that we know are currently in need of housing support. Or again, shouldn't that number be 18 or 20 and the target rather than 15?
That's a very good question, and that's a good thing to catch. There is a reason why that number was set as it is, and it does acknowledge that it is a little bit lower than historically the apparent need has been there. Part of it is recognizing that it is difficult to develop these programs, and it may not be possible to scale them up to 100% right away. The other thing that is ongoing as well, and Ms. Wilson may be able to speak to this a little bit more, is that Family and Community Support Services is also undertaking homelessness prevention initiatives. And so we are hoping that those as well may have an impact on the number of youth who actually need that support. Ms. Wilson, did you want to add anything to that response?
Yes, Your Worship, through to Councillor Stout. It is challenging to get an accurate number, and I think while it's a fairly good estimate, but I think the challenge with the youth piece is that we need to be working a lot more closely with children's services. because many of these youth still are basically living not necessarily with parents, but the parents have responsibilities to raise these youth until they're 18. And often the case is that through some sort of supports, whether it be through the youth center, sometimes we can get some of these youth back into their homes with their families. Sometimes we can't, and we do look for alternative needs of accommodation, whether that's temporary shelters, sort of to prevent that couch surfing that's going on. So I'm going to suggest to you that that's a really challenging piece for us, the youth piece in all of this. Because very often we will find alternative accommodation. It's probably not the best accommodation. And then there are times where youth will be going back to their parents with supports through children's services to help them be able to work through whatever is going on in the home so that they can live safely in the home and feel supported in the home. It is very challenging. Those statistics are maybe a little bit low, but there certainly is a little bit of an ebb and flow. And I think with support of the youth center and the programs that they offer, the goal would be that we would help get them back to their parents if that was the safe and responsible place for those youth to be, rather than putting them in some sort of temporary emergency youth style accommodation.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, but we still have, I mean, we've identified 18 to 20 annually, but we're only going to be able to provide shelter for 15. It just seems to me that if we're doing this, we should, if we're attempting to do this, and I acknowledge that it's a huge challenge and that the numbers will fluctuate, and that, yes, it's certainly possible that not all of those will need shelter all the time. But even so, it seems to me that if we've identified a need and we're targeting a program to address that need, then we need to size the program to address the full scope of the need, would be my observation.
And I agree, Councillor Stout. I think that is a good point. I hear what you're saying. I just feel that the goal for us at many times is to actually navigate those youth away from needing that kind of shelter and support. And I think that's where FCSS and the youth centre do come into this, because they do and have successfully sort of navigated them away from needing more sort of permanent housing. But yeah, your comment is well taken, and I certainly, we will take a look at that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stout. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you again, Ms. Sangster, Ms. Williston, and Mr. Wong. Great report. As you can see by the questions and comments, there's so much here. It's a very rich report, and there's a lot that this council and future councils are going to have to grapple with. And I want to thank you very much for acknowledging the role that the Leduc Regional Housing Foundation has been playing in housing in this in our city as well as in our region. I'm really excited to see that this has gotten to this stage. I don't by any means think it's an end. It's purely a beginning, and there's many things that need to come. But in my 6 years on the Leduc Regional Housing Board as chair for the last 4, this really does make me feel how worthwhile it has been. The expertise that the foundation brings, as well as the councillors from the 9 municipalities, or 7 municipalities, sorry, that are sitting at the table. I wanted councillors to know that recently in that role, I met with Minister Pond, who has the Housing and Seniors portfolio. And I took the opportunity to reinforce and reemphasize the importance of municipalities and the province working together in partnership. And I think that's a theme as well that my councillor colleagues have brought up. And I want you to know that I think we have a role to play as politicians in that advocacy role to bring to light the fact that no municipality can do this by themselves, and in Alberta, and I don't think anywhere. And we need the community, we need the nonprofits and the NGOs that are part of our community and our citizens as well to really help solve some of these very wicked problems that we have. I don't want to go on too long here, but I just wanted to take this opportunity as well to say that housing by itself, without the services that go along with it, is not going to solve the problem. The one example that I'll mention, given that Councillor Stout has brought up the youth homelessness issue, very complex. And I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but without having supports to families and supports to young people and people that are over the age of majority but are still unable to fend for themselves, we have to do a lot. We've done a lot. There's more to do. Affordable transit, childcare, affordable childcare, quality childcare, clothing banks, food banks, the list goes on. We can't just have affordable housing. We have to have those services as well. And I just want to end my comments right now by saying that I'm very comfortable saying that the Leduc Regional Housing Foundation staff are ready and willing to help if the municipality, and I know you do, works in partnership with the foundation to do more in this whole very important area. And last but not least, I would say that the provision and the support for land and help in developing these programs is something municipalities can and do. And I know the municipality of Beaumont is capable of looking at that in the future. So I'm very thankful that we've gotten to this point. And I just want to again reemphasize that it's a beginning and something that I'm very happy that this council has brought to this point. And the administration, thank you for your help in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barnhart. Appreciate those comments. Councillor Danlock.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for the presentation, ladies, and Mr. Wong, much appreciated. My questions revolve around the stakeholder input section of the report. I am curious. I have two questions. The first one being, I noticed there were 4 developer interviews and 1 builder interview outlined in the report. What is your assessment or feedback from those 2 groups of individuals, developers and builders? Are they lukewarm, warm, cold, ice cold towards affordable housing? What's the feeling among the developer and builder community on this initiative, please, if you could? That's my first question. Thank you. Just an assessment of your gut feel, how those interviews went.
Certainly. My overall feeling is that they went quite well, and I wouldn't necessarily put it in terms of temperature so much as issues and considerations that that they raised. One being on the importance of the city in terms of supporting developers through the approvals process and providing needed flexibility. And there was considerable interest in having a flexible regulatory environment to to help them develop things at a more affordable price point. There was some discussion as well of the need for, new models and new approaches potentially as well, whether that's looking at mixed income housing developments or other innovative models. There was some appetite for that as well. I'm trying to think back to other aspects of the conversation that we had. But those are the ones that generally come to mind. There was support for this type of strategy in the sense that it doesn't involve a lot of regulation. It does involve trying to provide flexibility and a partnership approach.
Thank you. My second question also revolves in also with the focus group with the public. Similar question, your assessment of the public's view of affordable housing from a positive or negative perspective, or your overall assessment of the public input from the general public on affordable housing? Thank you.
Certainly. The overall, I would say a larger proportion of the people that responded to the public engagement opportunities that we had were in support of affordable housing development and having a greater diversity of housing in the community. So there were some folks a little bit more opposed. Many of the concerns that they had related to concerns about potential decreases in property values, potential safety concerns, potential changes to the character of the neighborhood, which are things that we've noted, things that I think are quite common in municipalities across the country, if not the continent, and things that we can, as much as we can, work with communities to try to understand as well as we can before a particular project comes through. I should note that there's a fairly large body of research as well that finds that affordable housing that is well designed and well integrated into a neighborhood tends not to cause these kinds of negative impacts. And so hopefully that would be something we could communicate as part of that engagement effort, and that would be reassuring to people who have those concerns.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Councillor. Seeing no further requests to speak, is there a member of council willing to move that council adopt the Beaumont Affordable Housing Strategy as presented in attachment 2? Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Mayor. I would love to move the council adopt the Beaumont Affordable Housing Strategy as presented in attachment 2.
So moved. Thank you very much. Okay, so discussion on the motion. Seeing no request to speak, we'll call the question. All in favor? And that carries unanimously. Once again, Ms. Sangster, Ms. Wilson, Mr. Wong, appreciate all the work and effort that's gone into this. And with the acceptance of this plan, your work's just starting. So appreciate it and good luck as we go forward. Brings us to item 8C, a notice of motion from myself. As usual, we will allow the city clerk to introduce it, and then the floor will go to the person making the motion. Ms. Winder.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the members of the public and the council. According to the meeting procedures bylaw, once a notice of motion is made, it's placed on the next scheduled council meeting agenda. At the August 10th, 2021 regular council meeting, Mayor Stewart made the following notice of motion: that council direct administration to prepare a report and facilitate a discussion with council outlining some potential conditions and circumstances in which encroachments into the city right of way could be allowed, and to recommend the changes necessary to the land use bylaw to allow our development officers the latitude to allow this to be completed after the 2021 municipal election. Administration is looking for direction this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, City Clerk. So I will make the motion and then briefly explain my rationale behind it and open it up for questions and debate from members of council. So I move that council direct administration to prepare a report and facilitate a discussion with council outlining some potential conditions and circumstances in which encroachments into the city right away could be allowed, and to recommend the changes necessary to the land use bylaw to allow our development officers the latitude to allow this discussion and report to be completed after the 2021 municipal election. And so right off the bat, I'd just like to say I'm not looking for council to make a decision on anything last night. I'm just asking council to commit a future council to having a discussion surrounding it. And I'm going to draw council's attention back to when we first started the process of redoing the land use bylaw. We wanted it to be flexible. We wanted it to be a guideline. We wanted it to be easy to use, and we wanted people to be able to use it. And there's been some interactions I've had with residents and local businesses over the last year that have sort of led me to believe that perhaps we haven't quite done that, especially in terms of this. They've been coming to me and they've been trying to get some variances from our planning and development department, and our planning and development department, rightly so, has turned them down based on what's currently in the land use bylaw. And so I'm not saying that it's always going to be good to encroach into the right of way. And perhaps I'm not even making the right motion, because what I'm actually looking for is the ability for our development officers to apply some discretion and to where it makes sense to allow small things. Like the last one that comes to mind was a local business, LA Laser and Spa, who wanted to encroach by 2 feet into the deck, but our land use bylaw does not allow that. And so they've been turned down. And so as we move forward, I'm just hoping that this council will commit to having a future discussion to see about improving our land use bylaw and to make it work better, and to be able to facilitate businesses that are coming into our community and doing what we need to be done. So that's my rationale behind it. That's my ask. Open it up to questions and concerns from members of council. Okay. Oh, Councillor Daniluk, followed by Councillor Monkhouse Swing, followed by Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I could just look at the wording of your notice of motion, it's suggesting recommend changes necessary land use bylaw to allow our development officers latitude to allow this, which means, are you suggesting they don't have discretion now? My understanding is that they do have discretion within the land use bylaw itself, they can't simply approve an encroachment if it is not compliant with the land use bylaw. So I'm not sure I'm understanding exactly what more latitude you are looking to give them. They say they don't have the authority to change the land use bylaw itself. Now, I'm not very technical in this issue, but I'm trying to give an example as best I can. If an encroachment from a citizen or business is being applied for and it's not allowed by the land use bylaw specifically, they don't have discretion to change the land use bylaw. Only council has that discretion to change the land use bylaw. So I'm not understanding exactly what we're trying to accomplish here. Maybe a little more clarification, because it gives me the impression they don't have latitude. They do have some latitude, but to a certain point.
Exactly.
And they can't change an encroachment unless I don't understand their role properly, which I think I do, is that they have some latitude, but they can't simply grant an encroachment that the land use bylaw specifically says cannot be done. Only council can change the land use bylaw, is my understanding. So please clarify if I'm not understanding something, please.
No, you're understanding it correctly, and that's what I'm asking council to do. Only council can change the land use bylaw. So what's happening is these instances are coming in, they're not compliant in the land use bylaw, but they don't really make a bit of difference. They don't affect things like drainage. They don't affect things like passage. They don't affect things. As the land use bylaw is written right now, you can't, the answer is no. So what I'm asking for the power is I guess what I'm asking for is to give the power to our development officers to be able to grant a variance when things fall outside the strict definition of the land use bylaw, but don't have a consequential impact on anything. Like they're not, the encroachment's not going to affect drainage. It's not going to affect parking. It's not going to affect anything else.
Okay. Let me digest your answer, and I may come back with a follow-up. I see that other council have questions to go, so I'll yield the floor for now. I'm going to digest your answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
At this point, thank you.
Councillor Margolis-Wayne.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. My initial thoughts when I read this is that this is very specific. So maybe a question for administration. How often do we relook at the land use bylaw for review?
Ms. Dargy?
Thank you, Worship. Through to Councillor Margolis-Wayne. We review the land use bylaw every 6 months based on the land use bylaw monitoring. So that's looking at how long does it take us to process applications, how many variances are we granting, how many refusals have we had, how many decisions have gone to the Subdivision Development Appeal Board. Those all play a part in the monitoring of the land use bylaw and then allow us to determine what amendments we would recommend to council to make to the land use bylaw to continue to ensure that the land use bylaw is meeting the intention of the last rewrite, which was to make it easier to be used.
Thank you for that. Following up from that, I would imagine, obviously a significant document like the land use bylaw is something that would be put in front of the new council, part of that review process to sit down and essentially walk them through that, to go through that. And, my initial reaction is to vote against this. And in the sense that when we set up the land use bylaw, we talked about the implementation, the monitoring, and, every 6 months is pretty frequent. And at that point, I would imagine that administration would bring these type of issues forward to council to say, okay, these are the things that we're hearing, and these are some of the potential amendments we would make. So not just on this specific topic, which I get the frustration, but I think if we waited for administration, to bring this back in 6 months, this would be one of those topics. And if it's not, then we could raise it then. So my initial inclination would be to vote no on this, just to allow the process that we set up to take its course. So those are my initial comments. Hope that makes sense.
And I don't disagree with you, Councillor Margolis-Wayne. If it came up as one of those things as part of the normal review, I fully support that as well. But I just, wanted to make sure that it actually gets into the review as going forward. Councillor Stout, followed by Councillor Barnhart, followed by Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Just quickly reiterating then, my understanding of the land use bylaw is that it is a living document, that it changes and adapts and evolves to new situations and to improve. So anything we can do to improve it or adapt it to new situations is a good thing. But I'm not sure that's actually council's role directly. From what I just heard from Ms. Darji, that is already happening. And consequently, yes, there may be specific issues that perhaps we would like to see addressed. But I'm not sure we need to necessarily direct administration to do that, as those issues will as those issues will arise naturally in the course of the ongoing review that she just described.
Well, Councillor Stout, I'm going to disagree with you there. The notice of motion and council direction to include this is maybe in that, and maybe that's a friendly amendment, is to include this in the review to bring back to council when it's reviewed. The notice of motion process is the way that council gets administration to look at these things as part of their work. We don't have another mechanism. If it doesn't come up naturally, the only way that they're going to look at it for us is if we direct them to do so. Councillor Barnhart.
And I was wondering, am I on? Yeah. I was wondering if there was a way to make a friendly amendment on this, because I'm hearing what my council colleagues are saying, and I agree. I think it's too focused on the encroachment issue alone. And if that could be worded in such a way that that issue be included in the review, I'd support it. As it stands right now, I think it's telling administration specifically what to do without having the information, and I'm having difficulty opening up the whole bylaw to do that.
Well, I don't want to open up. Yeah, that was, and I agree with you, Councillor. That was, and I'm grateful for the discussion with my colleagues on council tonight. And I'm open to a friendly amendment. My objective is to get this issue looked at. So I'm open to suggestion on how to amend it.
How to amend it. Ministry and Prayer report facilitate discussion with council outlining areas that have been difficult to enforce, including encroachments, and bring it back after the election. I know that Ms. Winter could word that much better than I did, but taking out, I think there's a whole lot there that I would not want to see in this motion. Encroachment into the city right of way could be allowed, and recommend changes necessary to land use bylaw, because I think it opens up the bylaw.
Well, I was trying, and I was being very specific because I was trying not to open up the whole bylaw.
Right.
I just wanted this one small area looked at. So if we can figure out how to word that to include it as part of the review and bring it back to council, I am more than happy to change my motion. Think about it. We'll get back.
We'll think.
Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, my thoughts are evolving as the discussion moves forward, but what I had pressed my button to say was just a kind of a question to administration. The land use bylaw is pretty fresh. The issue of encroachments must have been complicated or contemplated at that time as the land use bylaw came together. And in the literal sense, looking at the notice of motion in front of us, is there a report and discussion to be had on this issue? Because it seems that the issue at hand is a black and white issue of to develop or not to develop, or not to be able to on an encroachment, or to provide an avenue for a variance. So I guess in a regional scan that would have been done, just top of mind knowledge, is there actual variances granted for encroachment onto right-of-ways or not? Because that seems to be the most simple question that is contemplated here.
Ms. Darcy?
Thank you, Worship. Through to Councillor Van Newkirk. Thank you for that question. So the notice of motion is asking about encroachments on right-of-ways. The land use bylaw deals with private property within property lines. And that's where the development officer's authority rests, is in the latitude to grant a variance to the setbacks or any of the other development regulations within the set property lines. Encroachments onto right-of-way are city property, and that's typically your road right-of-ways or utility line easements. And those then are circulated to other departments for input, typically our engineering department or our operations and infrastructure department, because that is then the city-owned assets. And it's with that consultation with those other departments determined whether or not an encroachment can occur on city property. So the land use bylaw regulations and the development authority's discretion ends at the property line. And then after that, it becomes city-owned property, and there's a circulation process to other departments to make that determination.
Yeah, thank you for that. So what that tells me is it's already not a black and white process, and there's already an ability and a conversation that occurs with these issues as they come forward then. So I'm struggling to see, I'm struggling with I understand the intent of what you've been explaining, but I'm struggling to see how this wording is going to help us get there, because what I'm hearing from administration is that there is some ability for some discussion already. So I don't know what you're thinking, and a friendly amendment could be. So I can't suggest anything right now.
Okay, Councillor Margolis-Swain.
Yeah, thank you. And so I'm not in favor of a friendly amendment, and I'll explain why. I think we've got a process that is set up that administration reviews us every 6 months. I would, I understand the one particular issue that came forward, and hopefully if the process works, that administration has, gone through that, they've got that, they're adding it to that list. And then every 6 months, we sit back with council and say, these are the things that we are thinking about reviewing, or we've had some concerns around. I think that's the process we set up in 2019, and we should stick with that. My concern is really around the precedent here of a 230-page document. If we're making notices of motions for anything, any change that we want to consider as part of the land use bylaw, where does that end, right? And I get this is one issue, and it must be frustrating for that particular business who wants to do X. But I think we've got that channel. We approve the overall policy, and then every 6 months we sit down, we hear feedback from administration on what concerns came in from the development community, and then we discuss them all at that point. If those concerns, like you mentioned, the specific one didn't make it on there, then that's a whole other issue that we need to talk through. But my intention would be to vote against this, and just let that process of every 6 months reviewing it fall out. So that's where I land on this.
Fair enough. And so my question goes back to you then. If it comes as part of that review and it's not there, what's the mechanism to get it looked at?
At that point, after the review, I think that a fair question would be, how does administration keep track of these concerns? What do they bring forward? What do they choose to bring forward as part of the review? What do they not? I would like to see administration say, we got these 6 or 7 recommendations. We're not bringing them forward because of X, Y, and Z. But I think that's part of that review. And I think in order to give the new council, because that's what your motion is speaking to, is, the new council term, give them a chance to go through that process. And then, if that process isn't working, then absolutely, a notice of motion to look at how we ensure that this type of review is incurred. So my gut would be not my gut, but my recommendation, and the way I'm going to vote here, is to follow that process that we established for a reason. 6 months is very reasonable. And if council is finding that administration is not bringing forward all those issues for discussion, then the notice of motion could occur at that point. But I haven't seen any evidence that administration's not done that so far in those reviews. So that's why I would vote no.
Fair enough. Councillor Danlick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Looking at the actual wording of the motion itself, give me half a second to explain my thoughts here. I'm looking at the motion the way it's worded, and what it's basically saying is that administration would come back to council, the future council, of course, and say, here's 5 conditions that would allow our land use development officer to circumvent the land use bylaw to allow an encroachment at their discretion. And that may satisfy one business, whereas 6 months later, 2 months later, another business comes back and asks for a similar type of discretionary on the encroachment. And the same development officer says no to them. And they'll say, well, how come it's yes to them and no to me? So now we're setting up a second level of discretion here. They'll say, well, that's what council gave me to do. And they'll come back to council in 6 months to redo the whole discretion thing again. So I'm seeing here a whole new level of complexity to a land use bylaw that I think was very well done by this council. It has got latitude for the development officer in it already. So I'm not comfortable supporting the motion the way it's worded in terms of setting up essentially a second layer of discretion that's going to come back to council saying one guy says yes and one guy says no. I'm having trouble supporting the motion the way it's worded. So I regret, John, but I'm difficult having to support this motion. Thank you.
Well, the intention of the motion is to have a discussion facilitated. The discussion may happen and it may turn out that none of this is reasonable and council turns it down. So the motion, I'm not asking you to say we should set up the discussion. I'm asking you to commit to a discussion about it. That's what I'm asking. I'm asking to have the discussion. I'm not asking to amend the land use bylaw. I'm not asking to do that. Whatever amendments to the land use bylaw will come out of that discussion, will come out of that with administration, will come out of it. And it may come, after that discussion, it may be that we don't change land use bylaw, and it may be that we don't allow it, and it may be that we don't do any of it. All I'm asking for tonight is simply to have the discussion surrounding whether it makes sense and a good idea. Yeah.
Thank you. I understand what you're saying, John, but respectfully, the way the motion is worded, to me, it's a commitment by this council to direct administration to do a bunch of work to come back with potential conditions, circumstances for the new council to consider to offer development officers more latitude on discretion. It's not simply matter to me. We're actually being asked to bind the hands of the new council to discuss something that we decided they should discuss.
Correct.
And I'm not prepared to do that, honestly, because I'm not sure I'll be on the next council. And if I am, great. If I am, I'll discuss at that point. But I see it's not simply a matter of having a discussion. We're actually asking administration to do a bunch of work and come back to the new council with a set of recommendations for them to consider. I'm not there yet. Sorry, I can't support the motion. Thank you for your discussion and your explanation, but I can't support it the way it's worded. Thank you.
Fair enough. Councilor Barnhart.
I have a question, Mayor, to either yourself or to the administration. I think it's probably, I'll start with the administration. And I would imagine Ms. Dargy. The report, or rather the monitoring that is being done every 6 months, is that automatically come back to council, or is that something council has to ask for?
Thank you, Bishop. Through to Councilor Barnhart. No, it does come back automatically. I will note that we didn't bring back reporting during COVID, only due to staffing and other resourcing issues, but we're back on track for every 6 months.
So that would then come back not to this council, but to the next council, or is there one before then?
No, the last one was earlier this spring. I don't remember the exact date, but we did present a reporting document to council. I think it was in May or early June. So the next one will be before the end of the year.
Okay, so after the election.
Correct.
So thank you for that. And Mayor, I agree with my colleagues here that I think the wording is way too specific and basically sets up council for encroachments into the city's right of way. Because if discretion is being allowed, that's we're saying it's okay. I have some fundamental problems with that. But I would be okay if you wanted to amend it to say something more general about the reports and the issues that are coming back. But since it does sound like that's going to come back anyway, it feels like we're making work that we don't need to make. So I apologize to you because I think I get where you're going with this, but I would say the next council needs to deal with it when it comes back.
Okay, CEO.
Yeah, at the risk of weighing in at the wrong time, I'm going to anyway. As Mr. RJ has explained, this is not a land use bylaw issue. This is an issue where operational departments look at encroachments on city-owned land or utility right-of-ways or public utility, whichever. And then between the departments, they weigh the pros and cons and decide whether it's allowed or not. So this review that you're talking about for the land use bylaw is not going to get you the solution you're looking for. The decision is made by the operational departments, and that's where it stays. What we're dealing with here is some people who don't like the decision, and we deal with that all year long, although I don't think it's a rampant problem, is it, Ms. Darjay?
No, we don't. We actually don't get a lot of concerns or complaints about encroachments onto right-of-ways. There are odd ones that come in. And then just with respect to the development or authorities discretion, the land use bylaw doesn't allow or doesn't have any restrictions on the development authority's discretion to vary a regulation other than what's required in the MGA. So ensuring that it doesn't materially interfere with the amenities of the neighborhood, et cetera. And if there is an issue, so if someone has applied for a variance and we have granted it, there's an opportunity for an appeal. If we've refused that application, there is an opportunity for an appeal. So there is that mechanism that is built in through the MGA and allows that appeal mechanism, again, on private land. And to reiterate again, Mr. Schwartz, that the encroachments onto right-of-ways don't fall under the land use bylaw.
Okay, so going down that path, I think I'm going to withdraw this motion because I'm on the wrong path, and I recognize that. And so there's an appeal process for the land use bylaw portion, but what's the appeal process for the decision made by the operational departments?
It can always go to the, higher to senior leadership, to the senior leadership of those departments if they're not happy with the decision.
And is there a formal mechanism to put the complaint in and make their case in a hearing sort of thing, or is this an informal thing?
No, it's not. There's no formal hearing process.
Okay, so I appreciate the discussion tonight, and I realize I'm on the wrong path with this. I know which way I have to go, but I need to think about it for a bit. So I'm going to withdraw this motion tonight because it's headed down the wrong way. And rethink how this is going to rethink the process. So I appreciate that. So I'm going to withdraw this motion and move on to item 8D. Notice of motion on transportation. Once again, the city clerk followed by me.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to members of council and the public. According to the meeting procedures bylaw, once a notice of motion is made, it's placed on the next regular scheduled council meeting. At the August 10th, 2021 council meeting, Mayor Stewart made the following notice of motion: that council direct administration to research transportation options for seniors and others to be able to access locations both within Beaumont city limits and outside of our borders. Some examples could be a DATS service, expanded bus on demand, ride sharing options, taxi vouchers, shared automobiles. Then facilitate a workshop and discussion after the 2021 municipal election, preferably in time for budget 2022, but in no case later than when the tax levy is brought for consideration in spring of 2022 in order to allow adjustments if necessary. This evening, administration is looking for direction from council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Based on discussion of the last motion, I'm going to amend this one as I make it. That council direct administration to research transportation options for seniors and others to be able to access locations both within Beaumont city limits and outside of our borders. Some examples could be a DAT service, expanded bus on demand, ride sharing options, taxi vouchers, or shared automobiles. Then facilitate a workshop and discussion no later than Q2 of 2022 or in Q2 of 2022. And that's just just changing that so that it takes the pressure off of budget and pressure off of doing things. One of the things that I've noticed over the last year, I've been in discussions with seniors and others, some of them the mobility challenged, for lack of a better phrase, and our transit system. Our transit system right now is currently one item which is a commuter service that goes into town. This council has been trying to move bus on demand to try and see that, and bus on demand is moving. We're getting some public feedback, but that's going to come back to the next council, not us. And I just want to be able to expand it because there are other transportation issues that bus on demand may not solve. There are other transportation issues that people are going to be having that this council can have a look at. And as we transition into the Transit Services Commission, they may not be able to do some of the things like the DAT service or the run into town for the doctors. And so just trying to get a jump and get this conversation started as part of the next iteration of our transit and transportation services. And things like taxi vouchers have been successfully used in other smaller municipalities like ours, where running a full-on DAT service makes no sense because it's cost prohibitive. And so once again, I am just asking council to pass this motion in order to be able to facilitate a discussion. And if taking the pressure off our budget and after the municipal election and moving it into Q2 makes council a little more comfortable, then and then so perhaps it'd be 2023's budget, then once again, I'm just asking you to commit future councils to a conversation. Open it up for questions and comments. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I do think that what you're bringing forward is an important conversation, but I have to admit I am a little bit confused by the notice of motion because we actually have the on-demand transit survey underway right now. The survey, when I look at the survey page, it actually reads and says what you're looking for. It says this survey is considering the community's future needs when it comes to transit services, and it invites residents to give their feedback on that. So the survey has been open since July 26th and closes August 31st. And for me, when I saw this, I brought this information with me a couple of weeks ago to the senior center and invited them to fill out that survey for the reasons that you put forward. When I was meeting with another member of one of the sub communities in Beaumont, I suggested to them and provided them the link to this survey and said, hey, spread this out and share the word. So I won't be supporting this notice of motion because I believe a large portion of this work is already underway, and there's a feedback mechanism built in right now to give us some of this information. I think collectively our effort as council would be better spent directing people towards this and getting the feedback through this mechanism that's alive right now. So that's where I'm at with this one. Thank you.
Fair enough. Councillor Danlock.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this notice of motion. I too have difficulty supporting it simply because this council, I think, has done a fantastic job, all 7 of us, to get Transit Commission up and running to do our work there. Councilor Monkoff-Swain represents us very well with the Transit Commission, and we're going forward with that. We have been talking about bus on demand transit as a group for a number of months now. We have I believe, a report coming back from administration on transit on demand topic itself. I've been talking to seniors a lot the last couple of years, and this is on their radar for sure, but I think we're already addressing this issue. And your last comment concerns me, where you said you want to make sure that the next council has this conversation. That's next council's decision to make, I think, whether to have this conversation or not. I don't want to be in a position where we're binding the next council to do something that we're already doing, I think, in this term already. And all 7 of us have agreed to talk about transit on demand, and all 7 of us are in favor of the idea in some way or form. So I don't see the need for this notice of motion, honestly. I think we have a report coming soon from administration on this particular topic. Public engagement is currently being done on this topic as well. So I don't think this motion is really timely at this point, and I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Fair enough. And I do appreciate the comments from my council colleagues. I do share your concerns to a certain extent, and yes, you're correct. Some of this work is being done through that survey. But I also think the survey is kind of narrow. And so if we had more time, we'll let it ride and let it go. But I think this is an important conversation, and I don't want to see it die as it goes forward. And so I still recommend, I'm still going to request that my council colleagues support me in this. Councillor McGowan.
Yeah, when I read this motion, I was visioning that, the next council at a, a strategic planning session sits down and this is a big topic that I think would be part of that. Those sessions looking at, okay, what do we want to achieve over the next 4 years? To me, this absolutely conversation is warranted, but I think that's the place for this type of conversation to have. And, as you know, any councillor or mayor can bring up any topic as part of that. So for me, like I know what you're trying to achieve here, and I'm with you. I want to have that conversation. I just think, is this something that, a topic that could be raised at a strategic planning session? I think that's what you're trying to do. You want council to sit down and say, okay, how do we solve this issue, right? We'll have the feedback from the bus on demand survey, and it may not go further enough, but hey, as a council, do we want to collectively, do we want to say to administration, this is one of our key focus areas over the next 4 years. We want you to dive more into this, as opposed to having a separate conversation around it. So, yeah, that when I read the motion, I'd love to have that conversation, but I think it belongs in the strat planning type thing. So maybe just some comments on that. Is that kind of your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I'll be honest. Like, sort of, yeah. Now that I'm sitting here thinking about that, it's probably a very appropriate place to bring this type of thing up and have that conversation. Because the strategic planning is going to be very important to the next council going forward as they map out their 4 years and what they hope to accomplish.
So I'm with you on what you're trying to do. I want to have the conversation, but it just feels kind of weird that we're August 24th. We've got one council meeting left, and who knows who's going to be here in 2 months. If I'm a new council member or the new council sitting down there and like, and administration saying, yeah, the last council mandated that you guys are going to talk about this, a month before the election was called. It just seems a bit odd. And so I guess my advice would be either withdraw it or amend it, but probably withdraw it. And if you're here in 2 months, then make sure that is something that we talk about during the strat planning. So yeah, I mean, if I'm here, I'll be right behind you to have the conversation. I don't know if I agree with notice of motion this late in the process, tying the next council similar to what's been shared before. So yeah, I'll just give that friendly recommendation. You do whatever you want with it and have it a vote on it. But I think let the new council at strat planning figure it out.
No, your comments make sense, and strat planning is a good place to go. And honestly, I'm just trying to bring awareness to this issue that I think it should be discussed, and there's major issues here. And so ultimately, in the end, if all we've had is a discussion around whether or not this conversation should be had, I mean, that's going to bring the awareness that I think I want to have happen. So I'm okay with that. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm on the same wavelength as the rest of my colleagues that have spoken so far, in that I do support the initiative. The timing is just off. And I don't think it is fair game to tie the hands of the next council but I can't for a minute believe that they aren't going to be talking about it. So whether it's us or it's someone else, this is an important issue in Beaumont. So again, I think you'll do the right thing here, but I do think that we don't need it at this point. I think it will be discussed.
No, and the point is, you're right. I was trying to get a jump on next council's work. It's a very important issue. It needs to be discussed, and I hear what my colleagues are saying, so I will withdraw this motion this evening as well, and go from there. But yeah, if I'm here in 2 months, then you can definitely be assured that this is going to come back up in a large way. Moving on, item 9, bylaws. There are none under consideration for this evening. Councilors' inquiries and reports. Start out with councilor inquiries. I do have one for the CAO. It's a bit of a timely topic. COVID-19. I hate to drop this bomb on you, but we're having this conversation surrounding in our surrounding municipalities. We're talking about, there's some municipalities around us talking about mask mandates. I'm being approached by members of the public asking about mask mandates. I'm just wondering what administration is thinking about as we move into this 4th wave. CEO?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Stewart and the rest of council. Regionally, we're looking at options that you just suggested. Are we looking at regional masking? Sorry, we want to be consistent with the region. So those conversations are happening. We meet once per week and then sometimes more than that to talk about what recommendations we want to bring back to our council. And yes, we are looking at the possibility of reinstilling masking. We are looking at the possibility of vaccine mandates for city employees. We're looking at all of the other restrictions that we believe we're helping to curb this thing. But no decisions have been made, but once they are, we'll bring a recommendation back to council. So it could be very soon.
Because I know at this point, I've been chatting with my regional colleagues as well, and a lot of us are in the wait and see mode to see what the province does, see what Edmonton does, see what the numbers do.
Yeah.
Hospitalizations, cases, that sort of thing. So look forward to seeing those recommendations as the situation develops. Members of council, Councillor Hendricks.
Your worship, thank you. Just I guess a comment or question or service level discussion. 50th Street northbound shoulder, lots of debris coming out of Larive, and I'm watching people on bikes trying to stay on that little line so they don't have to be in the dirt. Street cleaning, if we could perhaps gently get after that a little bit just to maintain that going north, at least from what I've seen. Thanks.
CEO?
Yeah, no, thank you. I'll pass that along to operations.
Who will speak from operations? Nobody's jumping in.
Sorry, my response was I'll take that back and we'll go have a look.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
I misunderstood you. I thought you said, yeah, I'll defer that question to operations.
Oh, sorry. No,
Sorry.
refer, I think I said.
Sorry, I heard defer.
And then I was typing down the action, so I didn't forget it.
Sorry,
And ignoring the rest of you.
I misunderstood. I thought you were passing the question along to a member of your staff. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of topics. The first one, I just wanted to check in on the status of a notice of motion that I made back in April. And I think I know the answer to this, but the notice of motion I made at that time was that council direct administration to identify funding sources and a suitable location for a cenotaph monument in Beaumont that symbolizes the sacrifices of all Canadian Armed Forces personnel who have served in Canada in a time of war. And what I believe is that it's an ongoing item, and possible locations need to be sorted out before the rest can happen. But I just wanted to check in with the administration if they could comment more broadly or more accurately maybe on that. Thank you.
Ms. Winder.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Van Newkirk. The Cenotaph project was rolled into the town project square. And because that project was delayed for 2021, the location of the Cenotaph was also delayed. I can assure Councillor Van Newkirk that once that project starts to move forward, the Cenotaph is going to remain in the scope of that project, and then a placement will be found.
Perfect. Thank you. No, that's the assurance that I needed. I appreciate that. Second question is around the Beaumont and District Heritage Society heritage home on the south side of Beaumont. Just wondering if administration could provide council and the community at large an update on the current status of the house located on the south side of Beaumont along 50th Street, and specifically when the exterior of the home, landscaping, including topsoil and perimeter fencing might be complete. And then I've got a follow-up and a comment. So thank you.
See you.
I saw an email chain earlier. I know, Carol, you had provided us with that information. Are you not able to pop that up, Shalane? It has the schedule.
Yeah, so I did provide that update. I just wasn't sure if there would be more than that or at all. So
okay, unless Ms. Darje has more, which I doubt that she does.
No, yeah, and that's fine. Like, and full disclosure, like, when I drop this on administration, I give them a heads up so that they can prepare, right? So So, this is what was provided online and the remainder of 2021. And this is for council and the community, right? Basically from what you read here, the commitment to getting the outside looking good by the end of the year is what has been planned. And I don't think any of the recent concerns that have been brought up have changed any of that plan, because this was all underway already and it was all planned. So what you see on the outside is installation of the basement extension and the windows, fixing up the plaster and the stucco, getting the parking lot, organized and surfaced, and some topsoil in there, with the goal of getting the, that temporary fencing down with a white picket fence installed. So, so that is the, that is the update that the Heritage Society has provided. So, I'll offer that out to the community, and that's it. There was, people are anxious and excited to see the final product for this project. So, yeah. So that's that part.
Follow up?
No, I
come
rolled
back,
it all into one.
You're rolling, okay.
Yeah, thanks.
No worries. Councilor Barnhart.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, it's with the transit back on the road again, with our bus back on the road again, I just wanted to follow up on our conversations that we've had at previous meetings, and just ask if there's any update on locations where the tickets could be sold. I did have a resident approach me and say, can we sell them at the library? Because the library is open later than City Hall. And for people that live on this part of the city, that's one location that they can get to more quickly than the Beaumont Sports and Rec Center. So I just wonder if that could be taken back, and perhaps you could see if that's possible or probable for the library board to take that on.
Yeah, hi, I'm trying to find the update I provided last meeting around the location, but I'll take that back. I was almost certain that it was included the library, but if they don't have a point of sale, then that wouldn't be possible. But let me figure that out and I'll get back to you.
Okay, last time I looked, it wasn't there, but it could have been updated.
Okay, then I could be wrong.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate that. Are there members of council just carrying on with 10B wishing to make a statement this evening? No. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Move on to item 11, CAO's updates.
Just on fire here this evening. Just a few quick things. Yes, transit was up and running yesterday. Ridership is not exactly overwhelming, but we've been receiving a lot of feedback that that's about to change. Obviously, with school starting and more people getting back to work. COVID, was hoping to not be talking about that tonight or any other night, but as you see in Alberta, the cases are continuing to rise. Hospitals went up, hospital stays went up, or hospitalizations went up by 14 in the last 24 hours, and they're sitting at 258. 57 of those are in the ICU, and tragically, there's 7 new deaths in the last 24 hours. I just find that mind-boggling. In Beaumont, effective the end of day yesterday, we have 45 active cases, which is the highest cases per 100,000 in the region. We've been in that position a lot, and a lot of it's got to do with our population. 45 against 20,000 is a heck of a lot different number than it is for the city of Edmonton. Dr. Hinshaw reported today that they're achieving 93% effectiveness for fully vaccinated people against the variant of concern. So that's certainly the answer, is vaccinations. Beaumont is tied for second in the region for those vaccinated, fully vaccinated. And that's cheers to everybody in all of the different age groups that Beaumont has stepped up. So good for them. Town and Country Days is coming up September 10th to the 12th. The parade is going to occur on September 10th at 1100 or 11 o'clock in the morning. And we're looking for volunteers to come on out and pass along some candy to the kids along the side of the road. So council, there could be a good opportunity for you to get out for that afternoon. I've done it. It's a long walk, so be prepared. And if you want to sign up, please contact Shima and or Lauren, and we'll get that figured out. A couple of weeks ago, I didn't have a chance to provide this update. Just very quickly, we had the hazardous waste roundup out in the operations center. It was a smoking hot day, literally smoking hot day. There's a lot of smoke in the air. But I got to thank the community and I got to thank the operations folks. It was organized better than I'm told than any other ones that we've organized in the past. I happened to spend the day down there. It was a lot of fun, quite frankly. But I got to hand it to the community. I never saw one person upset about anything. And we had tons of people driving out saying, you know what, thank you very much. They had Jeff Smith set up just a great loop out there. And we saw a lot of people and it was good, but people were patient. They were fun. It was a good day. So that's all I had for updates. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Brings us to item 12, correspondence. There is none. Brings us to item 13, notices of motion. Is there a member of council wishing to make a notice of motion this evening? Okay, if not, I do have one. Make a notice of motion that council direct administration to reallocate the $18,437 of the remaining funds from the small business support grant to the University of Alberta's digital marketing grant to allow for a maximum of 23 Beaumont businesses to apply for this grant. There will be more information coming to council on the results of the small business grant and put this all in context for you. But if I don't make the notice of motion tonight, it doesn't get on for council's consideration on the next one. So moving forward, closed session. As we move into closed session, I'd just like to reminder to the public that sorry, Bill, go ahead.
I apologize, Mayor Stewart. I neglected to make a comment earlier. As council may be aware, Mayor Tony Wadsworth from Millet had passed away a couple of weeks ago unexpectedly. I was able to attend the funeral on behalf of council. Councilman Swain and Councilman Newkirk and I served with Tony on the Water Commission. Tony was a long-standing civil servant for Millet and a great advocate for his town in the area. And I did give condolences to the family on behalf of City Council. And I wish I wasn't there, but I was because of the situation at hand. So Tony was a great guy, great civil servant for his community, and a good guy on the commission. So our condolences went out to his family on behalf of council. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I do appreciate that, Councillor Danlock. I had a chance to work with Tony on the Duke Sub-Regional Mayor's Caucus, and yeah, I'm gonna miss Tony. He was a very pragmatic, very good man, very good politician. All right, moving forward to item 14. As a reminder, under section 197.3 of the MGA, council is prohibited from passing a resolution or bylaw during a closed session meeting. If there is a direction or decision reached, council will revert back to an open meeting to the public, and the direction will be recorded in the public minutes. FOIP outlines the items that would allow a council to close a meeting, which includes matters where a public disclosure could be harmful to third-party business interests, section 16, third-party personal privacy, section 17, individual or public safety, sections 18 and 19, law enforcement, section 20, intergovernmental relations, which is sections 21, 22, 23, and 24, and economic or other interests, which is 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. Those are the only reasons that council may be going into closed session tonight. Do I have a member of council willing to move us into closed session pursuant to the Freedom and Privacy Protection Act to consider the regional initiatives updates under section 21(1)(a)(2) and 24(1)(a), and economic development opportunities update pursuant to the Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Act, section 24(1)(c) and section 25(1)(c). Councillor Danlock.
So moved, your worship. Thanks.
Sorry,
I'm not going to repeat that.
Long-winded. You know, that's okay. You can say so moved. Because I'm busy reading it. So, discussion on the motion. Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Thank you very much. To members of the public, we just moved out of closed session. There really is no business arising from it. I'm going to make a motion that council accept the item 14A, the regional initiatives update, and item 14B, the economic development opportunities update as information. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor? And that carries unanimously. which brings us to the close of tonight's meeting. Appreciate that, and see you all again on September 14th, unless an emergent issue comes and causes a meeting quicker. But see you all on the 14th for what will be our